For a panel of the day, we're going to be celebrating all things sport. Wales has quietly become a powerhouse in sports production, delivering world-class content that punches well above its weight on the global stage, even if my beloved Welsh rugby team are not currently doing that. This panel is going to bring together some key players from behind the cameras to explore how Welsh talent, how Welsh infrastructure and storytelling is transforming the landscape of sports media. So, joining me on stage, we have Nasfim, Haque, Kai Morgan, Carys Owens and Pete Andrews. Do you want to come up? So if I remember rightly, Nas, you're going first, and then Kai, and then Carys, and then Pete, if you don't mind, at the other end. Lovely, diolch. I should have mics there we are. Yeah. I get to keep the Brittany mic, though, so I'm taking this home with me as well. Right, well, okay, I guess where I wouldn't mind starting, if that's all right, is actually with you, Kai, if that's okay. Because when we think of sports programming, we often think of big OBs, don't we, live broadcast, and we'll get on to speaking about plenty of that later on. Now, Kai, if you don't know, was a big part of the team to win the commission for Last Pundit Standing, which is a big milestone here in Wales. If you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. Go and check it out. It's basically the X factor for commentators, isn't it, Kai?
Yeah, or The Apprentice, I'd say, is probably a little bit. But yeah, basically 12 up-and-coming content creators from all over the UK, and one gets a job at the end, or a contract at the end with BBC Sport. So, yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily think of sports programming as that, right? So talk to us a little bit about the journey to get to Last Pundit Standing, and then once you've done that, we'll have a little look at a clip as well.
So it was a tender that the Creator Lab at the BBC put out, and as a massive sports fan myself, even though we haven't done maybe loads of sport boom, it was something that we absolutely had to go for and go as hard as we could on it, because being a digital first commissioner, and we've got a really successful digital unit at Boom, I just really, really wanted to win it. So we worked really hard over the kind of over the tender process. We brought in a brilliant person called James Alcott, who's a really good YouTuber, works with the Premier League and Sky Sports, and together we come up with the idea, the format of Last Pundit Standing, and how it all work, and just went through the motions of the tender, and then next thing we're at Wembley Stadium for the FA Cup final, shooting the final episode. So yeah, it all happened really quickly, but the brilliant team at Boom just brought it together in such a short space of time, and it did really well as well, so we're really chuffed.
Well, if you've missed it, let's have a little flavour of what that looks like.
Let's bring in the caller, Mason. How are you, Mason?
Do you think that winning the Europa League would harm Manchester United in the long term?
Hi, Mason. Thanks for your question. I think it's all dependent on how you see Amin in the future, because, listen, for all we know, he could go win this Europa League.
What has he demonstrated?
It's a baptism of fire.
It's been a rough season. I understand that in the position that you're in. The caller was very angry, and I had to calm him down.
What do you think he's done? What do you think he's done this season?
I get what you're saying, but at the same time, this Europa League win could have a lot of potential.
I was going to say...
Yeah, but how would beating a poor Tottenham prove that he can do anything in the Premier League? Because they're just as bad as us.
Well, I speak to Man United.
It's Portuguese! Guy's name yet, whatever, Jones, Phil Smith or something, he would have been sacked.
The thing is, though, United fans...
a manager than this guy.
But whilst Callie's dealing well with an irate caller, Oscar is struggling to be heard. Literally.
He was a very, very angry caller.
He was an angry caller, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And there were quite a few others in the episode as well, so it's worth watching that one, definitely.
Yeah, and when you think of what were the sort of the things that you wanted to achieve with the show that you were particularly proud of, right? Because it touches on sport as more than just the ball being kicked and the car being driven or whatever.
I think probably one of the biggest things was that, you know, more so now than ever before, sports fans, content creators are becoming way more influential than they ever have done before. The voice of the terrace is becoming, you know, not maybe as important as ex-pros who are invaluable for us in sports media, but I think there's room for everyone. So it was brilliant to see. I think there were hundreds and hundreds of people applied to be on the show, and in the end, after quite a lot of back and forth between us and the BBC. We found 12 brilliant individuals, all with, you know, incredible backstories, all from different parts of the United Kingdom, all with huge amounts of passion for sport and football especially. So to get them all together in a series was brilliant.
Yes. How important is sport for BBC Three, Naz, in terms of what you're there to do? Because you're not necessarily someone as a channel you think immediately of sport, but then this sits perfectly on the channel and is about sport at the same time.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we're a channel dedicated to 1634s in the UK, and sport is a massive part of their lives. You're right, you know, we have BBC Sport, and they obviously do the live sport. We take some of that on our linear channel, but we also do sport through our sort of entertaining factual. So we just had incredible success recently with our Tommy Fury series. Previous to that, we did Amir Khan's series and Paddy and Molly. So we have done sport in other ways, including a series from a Welsh company here, Rockstars, about young rugby stars. So we've done sport through our factual commissioning. But with Last Pundit Standing, I guess it's an evolution. You know, it's an evolution given, you know, our Creator Lab initiative that we have, where we house creators and sort of bridge the gap between the creator economy and the sort of, you know, the conventional broadcast landscape, if you like. So it's an evolution and a way to kind of, you know, go into that space. So for us, we're incredibly proud of it. It's a great piece of work.
Because I suppose if you think of the big success stories in sports, sort of television of the last few years, a lot of them are documentaries that have a factual leaning, right? You know, Netflix and Amazon, you can't move for them. There was how many NFL I've watched them all. You know, so like your Tommy Fury one recently, it's that access, isn't it?
Yeah, it's access. But, you know, look, this is a great bit of innovation, and honestly, please go and support all the creators that were on the show. They've all got social followings, and, you know, the winner, Nahian, he's now doing work for BBC Sport, so we're really proud of this, and I'm proud of the fact that it came up from Wales, and it's, you know, represents the UK, so it's definitely a good example of kind of, you know, a way of kind of evolving sports content, so it's not just, you know, the Uber kind of celebs on the field doing things, it's more everyone's game, basically.
Yeah. And in terms of its social reach for you, did it work beyond just the channel itself as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to quote the stats, but it's good stats. We're happy, basically. But, you know, and also, you know, it's not, like I said, it's not just about the big names. It's about the creators that were on that show and the followings that they have afterwards and the content that they're making, and they're speaking to their communities about their sport. That's so important. That is the world of young people, and that's the world of BBC Three, to be in their world rather than kind of, you know, them trying to come to stuff that we kind of impose upon them. So
yeah.
That is very Three.
A different type of sports storytelling, Carys. I know your company does a lot of different type of content in the world of sport, but tell us a little bit about your growth as a company and what you're up to at the moment and the sort of things you're making.
Yeah, so we are a team in Tramshed, based there at the moment since 2020. But we are part of the Whisper group, but Whisper Cymru started its roots actually in Carmarthen I was founder of the original production company Lens 360. So being based in Wales for me was really important, and actually I think being freelance for a long time as well, I could see that there was a big hurdle there for a lot of young people trying to get into live sports production, but actually to work on the biggest stage really on tier 1 sporting events was really tricky unless you wanted to travel the world, either be based in London or Manchester really. So I think what we've seen, the evolution of live sport production, and it was actually since COVID, was the fact that we had to utilise connectivity to be able to broadcast not just sport but everything. We all lived on Zoom at that time, didn't we? But actually seeing the broadcasters actually brave it really and think about reliance on fibre connectivity rather than even satellites really, that we could actually just be fully reliant on that as a way to bring live sport to our screens. So yeah, when we did Tokyo Paralympics for Channel 4, that was it was a COVID production for us. And then I think it was just the evolution from that to see actually as a business, should we be looking at remote production in a serious way? So when we were pitching for the Paris Paralympics, so that contract was out in 2022. So we had a couple of years out to plan. And I always say that, sorry Pete to say this from Channel 4, but at the time I thought it was a little bit silly in an internal production call. I said, why don't we do it in Wales? And at the time was probably a little bit naively didn't realise that we had maybe a big enough facility or infrastructure here in Wales to be able to cope with a multi-sport event. So yeah, we thankfully won the contract from Channel 4 and then realised we had to admit that we needed to build something. So it was a challenging 18 months, but by the beginning of the Paris Paralympics, which was obviously last year, we'd built our own remote production facility called Cymru Broadcast Centre, and that's open to the entire industry as well. It's fully serviced by a production partner Timeline, but it's based here in Cardiff in Tramshed Tech, and any of you want to come and have a look, you can come and have a guided tour anytime, but it's been a game changer for us as a business, but also not just being a fully accessible production facility, but it's actually given so many opportunities now for local people, Welsh people, and I sort of look back at myself 15 years ago thinking, if I wanted to start a family, I don't actually need to relocate anymore. I can actually work on these big events. So by now we've relocated Formula 1 coverage from Channel 4 from Manchester down to Cardiff. We've currently just delivered the Women's Rugby World Cup, which broke so many records. It was the highest viewing figures of any rugby match for this year, and the highest viewing figures for a sporting event to be done out of Wales, really. So for us, we're really proud, actually. I was in Twickenham for the final, and everybody's raving about what's going on screen, and actually having that pinch me moment of going, this is coming from Cardiff.
Yeah.
The production team, they're all in Cardiff. This is all Welsh talent that's producing this.
I tell you what, we can have a little look as well, a little sizzle, get a sense of the work that you do.
It's all over. It's only just begun.
And Slash, and all from Cardiff, Carys, all from Wales.
Yeah, that's most probably one of the most recent show reels. That's pretty much this year. So we've got a base in Riyadh, and whereas before we'd been using a lot of local staff there, that is all fully produced from Cardiff for the Al Nassr football team. And then we ironically got to know the agent of Ronaldo, so he wanted some digital content made for his new YouTube channel, which somehow 4 of our production team from Cardiff ended up working on it, which, there was a lot of NDAs, mobile phones locked away, no one was allowed to talk, speak, no one was allowed to take pictures, but my 10-year-old son, when that crew came back, I am now famous in the house for knowing the cameraman that's filmed Mr. Beast, and I'm like, who? I had to do some digging on that. I'm a bit too old for all of that now. But, it's everything from that sort of content all the way through to the British and Irish Lions, Women's Six Nations. It's been a full jam-packed year this year.
I thought for a second you said that you'd taken Ronaldo out in Cardiff. I could see him in Metros.
Well, one day.
I could see him in Metros.
One day. We're Welsh, aren't we? We can twist his arm, I'm sure.
Having toast at 1 a.m. with everybody else. Pete, I suppose what we've talked about there is a full range of sports programming, right? From, bespoke, digital-first ideas to your traditional sort of coverage of a big event like Formula 1. Where do you see the landscape of sports on television going? Is it going to be more of one or the other, a mixture? What do you think?
That's a big question.
You're in the big chair.
Pressure's on now.
Yeah, well, do you know, I think there's plenty of legs in linear telly and big TV events. The World Cup's coming up, and, as we know, massive events for the BBC and ITV. I think events where families will sit together and watch things is getting less and less and less. So those big moments, live moments, are hugely important. So I think sport is super strong. It's becoming more and more important to every single channel, particularly to reach the younger audience as well. And there's great potential to do loads of digital stuff, which may goes into their space, as we said earlier. But I think, you know, the gift of a live moment that you can all sit down together is something special. And you've even programs like Strictly or things like that, they have those live moments like it's a sporting event, because it gets spoiled if you miss it.
Yeah.
So that's
I think I'm
key.
stealing someone's slogan when I say it's only live once, right?
That's true.
That's the competitive
Unless
slogan.
you watch the highlights on Channel 4, yes.
Yeah, quite. And when it got to you making the decision to commission these big sporting moments, was it ever a consideration? Oh, it's coming from Wales. Did you have to think twice about that?
It was a massive bonus. So, you know, as Channel 4, we exist to kind of keep the indie market charged. And I think sometimes that's difficult when money's going down and all those sorts of things. I think we feel that responsibility quite heavily. You know, when Whisper came in, who are a brilliant company, had done amazing stuff for us, and said, 1, we can do it from Cardiff. 2, we'd have to build a new facility. That 3 will be left as a legacy. I mean, apart from having to look at Carys and saying, okay then, off you go, you know, for us it's an absolute dream, because of course, you know, that can then stay, and it's really important for us that we could not just help get it started, and Whisper did it, not Channel 4, let's be clear, but it was on the back of a Paralympic commission, which is how we can commission it. And then we promised to say, if you do build it, we'll then move the Formula One there the year after. So we didn't have the problem of something being built, which was then used for a couple of weeks, massively important weeks, but then empty. We sort of then thought, right, well, we'll fill it with the Formula One. And then I know some of my 4 skills colleagues are here as well. So we've used some of the 4 Skills Fund to then, there is so much talent in Wales. I mean, you know, because there's S4C and all the BBC Wales stuff and the BBC stuff too. But a couple of specialist roles, 4 Skills can then help train local people. So the idea being that when we come back for the next Paralympics, which we might do, who knows, we can have local people. And so for us, for Channel 4, it was just a huge opportunity that Whisper made happen, but we were able to provide the programmes to help fuel it. So we were thrilled. And never had a doubt that the talent would be here. I'm always worried about technology, but Carys got that done, including a drop curb with the council, which I think was the most difficult thing.
Yeah, that was the idea of it all, isn't it? Is actually learning how the legacy of a Paralympic Games, what happens behind the scenes of the commitment that Channel 4 and actually the emphasis that Channel 4 put on all the production teams to have that representation behind the scenes as well. And it was so shocking, wasn't it? The findings where we did some research work before we built the facility of actually the hurdles, the challenges, individuals have never been able to ever have the opportunity of working on live sport, because a lot of the time they couldn't physically get to a ground, a stadium, and then get into an outside broadcast truck. So we've almost lost a whole generation of talent because they couldn't physically get to the job. So this is there was multiple layers, but I think kudos to Channel 4 for basically making such an emphasis on that for that production. And that is now not just disabled talent working on para-sport, that's on any sport, any live production.
Yeah, and Kai, that was a sort of a theme for you in a different perspective in terms of on-screen talent as well for your show as well, right? So showing that sport is for everyone, not for...
Yeah, massively. And, you know, it's worth saying, as I mentioned earlier, we had hundreds of people apply, and all 12 of the individuals who got onto the show were there because they were absolutely brilliant at what they do. And we could see from their content how passionate they were, whether they were from, you know, the other side of the UK or, you know, whether they liked women's football, men's football, really niche tactics. It was really, really brilliant to get a really excellent, strong, diverse cast. And, you know, we had Toby in the show who only had 10% vision, and Cal from Glasgow who lives with cerebral palsy, but they were both absolutely fantastic pundits to have in the show. And you know, it was a pleasure to work with them, you know, behind the camera to ensure that all of the challenges they could take part in were, you know, fully accessible, and that it would be a really fantastic challenge for them to take part in a slightly different way, but
and
ensure that it was completely accessible.
You put proper extra thought into that, right? Because sometimes the decision to not cast someone, sometimes it's out of fear or uncertainty that you're doing the right thing, or how you deal with it.
No, you know, we were from day one. You know, the cast that were involved were there because of how good they were, and we had a brilliant accessibility coordinator that worked with us throughout the series, and you know, it was an honour really to spend that extra time in really thinking how we can make this, you know, a fair playing field for them, and they can really kind of excel, and they did, and both Toby and Cal in particular got all the way to the semi-finals, and Toby to the final himself. So, and you know, invaluable insight, fantastic content creators, and it was, you know, a pleasure to have them on the show. So,
and as a channel, Naz, how important is that for you as well? Because sometimes sport can be thought of as something that caters to a very specific person, specific audience. But actually, if you look at the research, the amount of people that like sport are from all ages, all backgrounds, all genders. And so how important is it for you to be seeing that?
It's hugely important. I mean, you know, we're focused on under 35s, particularly under 24s. And I would say, you know, they don't view some of the issues that, say, older people might have around kind of, you know, multiculturalism, et cetera, et cetera. They just don't have that. It's a part and parcel. And I always say to people, you know, with us, you know, normalised portrayal is better than just stories about, you know, I'm brown and I'm doing X. You know, you're better off having normalised portrayal across all our content, whether that's, you know, fact, dent, sport, music, whatever that is. So it's hugely important, because actually it's just the attitude of that generation. They have a very different attitude. They're not as kind of, you know, welded with certain things as, say, other generations. So
yeah, and with Last Pundit Standing, was that did you always think of that as a digital first commission, or how did that end up being? Because I can remember I was seeing clips of it way before it was on the telly, and I thought, oh, that's really innovative the way that you've done that. Was that always the plan? So
it's part of our Creator Lab initiative, so I do urge suppliers to have a look at what that is, and have a look at our commissioning page, because all the details are on there.
Yeah.
And it came out of kind of that initiative. So actually it's a couple of my colleagues who work in our BBC Three digital team who manage that. It's built off the back of our sort of partnership that we have with TikTok. So last year we housed a range of creators, I think up to, I think it was nearly up to 100. Chris, our press person, can correct me later. But this year we thought, okay, what specifically could we do? And actually, fair play to Alex, who's our director of sport at the BBC, because he had this passion when he came to the BBC that he wanted to give a voice to the next generation. So it was kind of an amalgamation of what we already had in-house, you know, the Creator Lab initiative, and then Alex's drive. And actually the brilliant thing about the show is that it used BBC Sport infrastructure. So if you watch the series, you'll see big names, all the big shows, big sporting brands, all feature. So it's just such a brilliant collaboration.
Yeah, well, like we saw in the clip earlier, 606, that's a fan favourite, that show. People go crazy for that, don't they, Kai? And how difficult was it to think of, because we've seen so many different sport programming in the past. How difficult was it to think of something that was truly different and unique? How long did it take you on that table?
As someone who watches loads of sport and consumes loads of sport, I hadn't ever seen a format where kind of people who are content creators get a chance to kind of be really front and centre working for a massive sports broadcaster like the BBC. So it was quite fun, and we really enjoyed kind of developing the idea. You know, we produced tasters, episode explainers, the biggest deck I've ever made in my life, just to make sure the Naz and everyone. Yeah. So we really kind of worked night and day on it, as I know everyone else did in the tender process, but. It was one of those kind of tenders that we went into really believing in the idea from start to end, and kind of thought, if we don't win it, then that's the BBC's loss, because we really backed it, and everyone did on the team that was developing the idea, and then who went on to work on the production. So I think, you know, that all helps when you come to actually make it then, and then when you get the email or the phone call to say congratulations, you've won it, you're kind of like, oh bloody hell, we actually have to go.
Yeah, now we've got to go and make it. Oh,
so,
gosh.
I
can make a deck for you. Now I've got to make a TV show.
Yeah.
Carys, obviously, you know, you've got to this stage now where you've got the broadcast centre up and running. You've made covered some major sporting events from here in Cardiff. When you think about the opportunities that are next out there for people in the room who want to make sporting programs. What do you think those opportunities are? Is it all about programs that come alongside sport, like Last Pundit Standing or documentaries, or whatever? Is it about bringing more live coverage to Wales? Is it a combo of both? What do you think the opportunities are?
Yeah, it's still very competitive. It's a competitive market all over the world. I think the point of difference we've got in Wales is that the massive sport that we're still covering, and that's down to the likes of S4C. You know, we were chatting earlier, weren't we? We broke our teeth into the industry in Tanopolis back in the day, and having that sort of live coverage, you know, daily for young people is really crucial. And it's the same with sport. So, you know, having the hours under your belt is brilliant. That's what you need to get to that next level. And that's our USP in Wales. And I think that's why I've seen it a few times. I don't know if you've noticed it as well when we were doing the paras of the breakfast show team was all Welsh, weren't they? It was our office team without the freelancers involved. And sort of, you could hear some people just sometimes half and half. We call it Wenglish, don't we here? But speaking a little bit of Welsh, a little bit of English over talk back. And actually some people going, oh God, they're good, aren't they? And it's like, well, yeah, they've had hours and years of training, really. They've been doing live sport most probably longer than a lot of people that are outside of Wales. So I don't think we should forget that we're quite humble, aren't we, most of the time? So we don't champion ourselves to sort of put our heads above the parapet to say we're good enough, and we are good enough to compete with the best broadcasters in the world. And when you layer on the remote production element of it, you don't need to be travelling to the other side of the world anymore to be broadcasting this stuff. You know, the Lions this summer, it was all in Australia. The whole production team was once again in Cardiff. So I think it's most probably pulling together and seeing what talent pools we've got here in Wales and actually going bigger, thinking bigger, going for the biggest broadcasters in the world. I think that's something we should be looking at. And I think with the most probably the World Cup this summer, we've actually seen as well how the BBC are changing the way that we were under a lot of pressure to be delivering things outside of just that live element. We had several digital producers that were just roaming the grounds whereas before they'd be classed as an assistant producer or researcher that would be feeding into the live programming. No, they've all got mobile phones creating content that's feeding back to the digital teams. You know, layering on breakfast show, the weather, Strictly, One Show. So, you know, it was probably thinking multi-layered really and multi-genre, not just thinking of sport as one thing and it's live or highlights.
Yeah. Is that how you think your fellow commissioners in Channel 4 and fellow bigwigs, Pete, I'm going to call you if you don't mind, you know, when you're having your meetings around the table, you know, is it all about these genres are sort of, these program types are all sort of feeding into each other now, right? It's not just, you're not just in a silo doing cricket over here or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, talking about attracting the younger audience is key. And if they're interested in sport, then that's a great way to reach people with programs. I still think your live sports broadcast is still your best opportunity. And I think it does depend on how popular that sport is and how many people are looking at it. So I think you need your big event as a tentpole. And then you can bring things in. And I think, you know, let's say the Premier League's probably year to year the biggest thing outside of international tournaments. And of course, all the content creators, I guess, that you find, Kai, you know, that because there's so much talk about the Premier League, that they have their own audiences talk about, whether it's a club or whether it's the league itself, all of these things is huge. So, yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about what you can bring, and then also going to places where you can engage with younger audiences who maybe aren't coming to, you know, if we were to put a program on Channel 4 that was all about, now I'm going to show how old I am, but about something that people really liked, they're not going to come to Channel 4 to see it. You've got to go where they are, which is where when you talk about doing stuff with TikTok and everything, it's about getting in and engaging. And then just to back up what Carys said about Welsh talent, I mean, I came through the ITV regions. That tells you how long ago that was. They're all closed. And we would make local football, rugby, athletics every week, all the time. And we just had that constant churn of learning and people. And then, of course, you know, early 2000s, they all disappeared. And I think Wales is somewhere where people still get that exposure to OBs all the time, and that's why there's so much talent here.
Yeah.
Which, you know, in Birmingham, where I'm from, it's probably not there.
We've got just between about 10 and 15 minutes left of this panel, so we'll open up for questions a bit at the end. But before we do that, just one more, just to finish up, if that's okay. Naz, what would you say to people perhaps in the room who are listening who think, I've got an idea that is sort of sport adjacent, and I think it would work really well for BBC Three. What would your advice be to someone who wants to sort of pitch a show to you?
Sure. I mean, look, leverage being outside of London, I think that's really important. You'd be surprised how many people send us the exact same idea. Everybody consumes the same things. It's actually a miracle when you see something that's completely different. It's come from a completely different cultural imprint, because you're like, wow, someone's obviously living on a different planet to everyone else, but that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Love that. So leverage, if you are from outside London, use it, read your local paper. I mean, one of the titles that we're most proud of is a recent box set we did with BBC Wales called Confessions of a Steroid Gang. It's absolutely hilarious caper about a father-son who basically made steroids in their backyard because they could see a market in, you know, men bulking up. And it's probably a local news story, like you wouldn't see a long read in The Guardian about it, but it's such a brilliant story, brilliant characters, and it was set in North Wales. So I'd say, look, use what's around you. Don't worry what the London set are doing. Just think about, you know, what's happening outside, because they were so interested in that. And also the other thing I would say is people really do miss the commissioning page at the BBC. So have a look at bbc.co.uk/commissioning. We had an opportunity that closed yesterday. We do actually update that page, and we do put things on that page. And sometimes we feel it you know, it's quite hard to get our kind of, you know, we can go to events and we can be in broadcast, but actually we want to speak to all of you guys, so please have a look at that page, you know, consistently. There are opportunities on that page, and my colleagues do update that page, so I urge people to have a look at that and think of it as an active way to chat to us, basically.
Yeah, and Pete, same question to you. If there's someone there thinking, I've got an idea that would work really well for Channel 4, how would they come and talk to you about it?
Yeah, well, just send me an email. Top line is absolutely fine.
What's your email address?
peteandrews@channel4.co.uk. That's fine, I don't mind.
Shouldn't have done that, sorry.
Yeah, no, honestly, I would have said it if anyone's interested. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I have to say that the sport team at Channel 4, we are mostly engaged in live and highlights coverage of actual sport.
But what, out of interest, sorry to interrupt, as actual sport, have you got the certain types of sport that you would touch? If somebody had an esports idea out here, for example, or live chess or whatever, are you open to, or you look after your big tent poles, rugby, football, cricket, tennis, you know?
Always open to reading a top line. I think genuinely to get into the niche, esports probably doesn't work on TV because everyone watch it on Twitch. I think we wouldn't do it, I think, because the audience isn't there. I think that's just one of those things. That's the kind of reply you'll get from me. Very quick, direct. So although pitches are amazing, if it's to me, just send me a couple of lines and we can save you loads of time. Or if it's a good idea, then we'll say, okay, let's talk about it a bit more. So we're always really open to even just, I got an amazing email once someone sent me that said, this is the greatest idea ever, this has never been done before, and sent me an idea, and then I was able to send them the 4 times it'd been done before and said, thanks very much, but you probably should have Googled it before you sent it. And it was a great little conversation, and that was the end of that. But so always really happy to people can get in touch and we can discuss it.
Yeah,
absolutely, no problem.
Lovely. So your inbox is going to be jam-packed tomorrow morning, which is great.
You're welcome. Send me emails.
Any questions for the panel? Oh, I've got a couple of other thoughts we can wrap up on. Anybody got anything particular you need to ask the panel? If not, I will go again. Right, Kai, for you then, what would your advice be to other people out there? You've managed to make this digital-first commission work. You've created a new format out of nowhere. What would your advice be to others who want to do the same?
Advice. I think making taster tapes really does help. And as well as making a taster tape, we also made sort of like a format explainer, which you could think, well, that surely is what the taster tape is. But the taster tape was more of a kind of like, wow, look at this sort of thing. And then we just started really sharp, detailed, punchy format explainer then, which didn't end up actually being what the format was, but it was a brilliant kind of explainer that we could go straight into a pitching meeting and show. It really does help take the pressure off then, because verbally pitching things under pressure, when you've got a big kind of panel from the BBC, all different stakeholders, all wanting to make the most of this opportunity between TikTok, the Creator Lab, 3 and sport. You just really want to make sure people understand it, because in an eliminator format or a show where someone needs to win, there's going to be naturally a lot of scrutiny from commissioning to make sure it's clear. So I'd say, you know, if you can do it, really try and make the best taster you can.
Was it hard keeping... Sorry,
I just want to add to that. The other thing I would say is when you see briefs that say sport or specialist factual or history, don't get so hung up if you haven't done that. I think that's something I would say, because interestingly, all the shortlisted companies for this particular brief, none of them were big sports players. So it's actually all about the form and the sort of, I suppose, the output. That's what we're looking at, and think about the audience. So for us, that's 16 to 34s. So I would say, please don't be, you know, kind of hung up on, oh, well, I've not done sport, we've not done any live sport, we've not done specialist factual, we've not done archive. Just apply. If you think you've got the idea and you can convince us that you've got that heft, go for it, I would say.
And Kai, I was just going to ask, is it more with pots of funding and buy-in coming from lots of different places, was that actually harder to manage rather than having one person you sort of speak to?
Close your ears.
Yes.
Because
you got because now all of a sudden you got 4 bosses, right?
No, I think, to be fair, it was really sport, BBC Sport, Alex, Sam Merton, head of social, and Kira Murray were kind of, they really took the lead on it, because obviously at the end of the day they were giving a job to the winner. So so we kind of spent a lot of time talking about the series with the team at Sport, and I think, you know, in this instance TikTok were, you know, almost at arm's length in some respect, and they had to help us on the distribution side, and we're so pleased then to see how well it did on TikTok, because we ended up putting 25-minute episodes up on TikTok, and, you know, I think the first ep did 5.5 million views, which was just nowhere near what I expected. It was incredible. We were so pleased, and brilliant engagement. So you know, it was a part of the success of the series, I would say, in that you had so many different people involved, because you had a lot of different expertise, and all kind of with the same goal of making this as successful as we can in a super busy period of Wimbledon, the Women's Euros, the start of the Premier League season, and trying to establish a formatted fact-end show was a challenge, but everyone pulled together, and I think that's why it probably did as well as it did.
Yeah. And Carys, your sort of advice or tips to people who are out there trying to make sports programs, the things, or, you know, because you're all the different people you work with?
Yeah, I think that's something we didn't touch on is obviously having good relationships with federations, teams directly as well is actually very useful. Sometimes athletes directly as well, agents. Is also having, if you've got that, you can also sometimes go in with some sponsorship, partnership brands as well. And that's something for Channel 4 that's been quite insightful with things like the Paralympics. And obviously we see it a lot with like the Women's Rugby World Cup that's just passed. It's, you know, there were several brands we were also delivering for that was all the digital content, but the fact that we had all the live streams coming into Cymru Broadcast Centre, that we could actually utilise all that content much cheaper for those brands as well. And once again, it just layers on for that audience to be bringing more visibility to the entire tournament. So I would say that just brands and those relationships are also key.
And final thoughts, sort of, Pete, in terms of what you think the sporting landscape looks like now for the coming few years in terms of its role in television?
Yeah, I just think it's really big. I think what's going to be really interesting is whether the big streamers come in or not. I'm not convinced they will. I think people think they will, but I think if you think about it in the sense that if you're Netflix, for instance, you know, and you've got so many subscribers, does sport get you more subscribers or does it not? I think that's an interesting thing. Whereas with Sky, you have a very clear business plan. We take the Premier League, people come in, they subscribe. And of course, you then need the infrastructure to then put live stuff on, which is interesting. So we've seen people come in for big one-off events, which are maybe sport adjacent, like your Tyson fight or this and the other. Those sort of things are happening, which get millions and millions of people watching. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I think the federations obviously would love the big streamers in, we probably wouldn't, because we haven't got loads of money. we want to keep getting sport on, but we do have the brilliant protected list, which is a bit of government legislation that we love, which means that we'll see the World Cup on BBC and ITV and things like that, which is really, really important. And I think it just becomes more and more important for families and people watching things together, the things that you can sit and watch with. I've got 3 kids, the things you can sit and watch with them, the big moments. It becomes more and more and more important. And I guess even, with a brilliant show like that on BBC Three, and BBC Three also taking sport, in the linear, is so important to linear.
Yeah.
I think, and for us, for advertisers, but also for eyeballs, I think it becomes more and more important the longer we go on, and as things change, the live moments become more valuable. So
yeah,
really
watching sport with your family is so important, isn't it?
Those moments is when everyone sits together are precious. Yeah, definitely.
My daughter's 18 months and she hadn't seen Wales win for the duration of her lifetime, which was lovely until the summer.
Don't open that can of worms.
I know. And last thoughts from you, Naz, in terms of how do you see sport on your channel in the next couple of years? Is it going to be an important place on 3? Do you think?
Yeah, look, we've got 4 more episodes of Tommy Fury coming up in December, so watch out for that. So that's one way of doing sport. Obviously, got our live sport offer, and then who knows, we have more of other things brewing. So just watch this space.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, thank you very much for being with us and for being so open and talking to us about all your successes and the lessons you've learned. It's been great. Diolch yn fawr iawn. I Nasfim, Kai, Carys a Pete, thank you very much. All of you, do you want to come this way?